Welcome back to the morning grind here at RotoGrinders.com. Dean here. It's not Stevie. Of course, this is Stevie's podcast. He's busy knocking out his NASCAR content. I'm busy, if you guys are actually watching the video feed, knocking out my earpiece. That's why it threw me off there for a second. But we've since recovered. Of course, if you guys listen to the audio podcast, you have no idea. Where it's like, hey, why is he stumbling and rumbling? Stevie, of course, is knocking out his NASCAR content here at RotoGrinders.com. Today, we're talking another, I was going to say fringe sport, but let's not insult the sport. Let's talk about MMA. Let's talk about UFC, and let's bring in our resident experts. It's Artivore, SunTszu, Joe. Joe, we're talking some UFC. Let's do it.
Love it. So I should say, first and foremost, that I was listening to one of the channels on Sirius. I won't say which, but apparently the MMA handle is now surpassing the handle on PGA. As it relates to straight betting. And there's a number of reasons for that. I mean, people obviously, you've got 11 fights and they like the one-on-one and, it's, as opposed to kind of picking golfers or straight up matchups. But I'm hearing that the handle on MMA is risen really rapidly. And maybe that's a good thing for signs to come. And DFS golf still, surpasses MMA. And I will say that as a tribute to this show, The Morning Grind, of which I believe I'm making my fourth appearance on, I had a Mocha Master, and for those of you that don't know what a Mocha Master is, that is a high-end coffee machine from Finland. It's got to go through customs and everything to get to you. And what it's known for, it's very simplistic and zen. It heats the water to the perfect temperature for coffee, like between 110 and 115. So I blew the dust off my Mocha Master, ordered some estate-grown Jamaican Blue Mountain beans, which I'm going to grind. And when I listen to myself, either tomorrow or Friday, whenever this is coming out, I'm going to brew up some Jamaican Blue Mountain.
There you go. I'm currently drinking some vitamin water for some context.
Okay. Good stuff.
It's all right. Yeah. It does the trick. Sure, why not? But you've sold me on that. That sounds like a big ordeal. It's a Finnish. What's
a Finnish coffee maker. It's called a Mocha Master. It's like Techniform, but it's known as the Mocha Master. So if you searched Mocha Master on Amazon, you would come up with it. And again, it comes from Finland. Very zen, just heats that water to that perfect temperature for coffee.
The unofficial sponsor for today's podcast, the Mocha Master. There you go. I don't have a promo code for you guys, but maybe you can find one on the interwebs. I have no idea. You mentioned PGA. We're recording this on a Wednesday afternoon. There's been I haven't fully got all the news on that, but I know there's some COVID cases there, and I think they're going to be powering through and playing through. But several people have withdrawn, and of course, you see them every single time you're on. There's always again. You're probably going to be listening to this on Thursday. We're recording this on Wednesday. News is in flux. News actually broke right before we started recording, so we kind of paused for a second. Just basically saying we're throwing up the red flag and always be cautious of, who's in, who's out, who's replacing who, and what do we have? We have several changes as of Wednesday on this UFC card.
Yeah, the latest change, which I think just dropped about 30 minutes ago, is Miranda Maverick, who is a new signee from Invicta. A 22-year-old prospect, someone who I scouted, someone who I love her ground game. I love females who wrestle. I don't know why she pulled out, or why she was pulled, but she's out. And they are looking for a short notice replacement for her opponent, Barella, who was coming into the fight as a plus 250 underdog at 7.1K. So I'm not sure what's going to happen. Barella's coming off of 3 straight losses. So no matter who they put in against her, I can't imagine she's going to be the line's going to flip that much. She's not going to be a huge favorite coming off of 3 straight losses, but there may be some value there at 7.1K if they do actually find a replacement. And then we had Shawn Woodson has a new opponent in Juicy J, Julian Erosa. Kyle Nelson fell out. That he is now Shawn Woodson, the highest priced favorite at minus 455, if you can believe it or not.
Wow.
Juicy J Arusa is not a horrible fighter, and I certainly would not be wagering minus 455 on Shawn Woodson. He is freakishly tall for a featherweight at 145. He's 6'2", has a 79-inch reach. Arosa is actually fairly tall for a featherweight as well at 6 foot. He has had a 5-inch reach advantage. Woodson, I believe, was an underdog in his last fight and came through. He's definitely, DraftKings, I can see him getting a lot of ownership. I don't know that, he's quite the plug and play, to get a finish, but he's definitely going to get ownership.
Yeah, I have all the if they're going to go to distance, not going to go to distance props and things like that. But since that just changed with Woodson versus Arosa, Juicy J, as you put it, we do not have an odds on that. But like you said, Woodson is currently, it's not cheap. He's 8.8K, but the biggest favorite on the board. You said he's 4 and change. I pulled up on FanDuel, he was 370. So maybe, I don't know. Maybe you said you didn't like that number. Maybe it's some value in 370. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
it's better.
If you could get 370, he was minus 455 on DK last time I looked.
Yeah.
Maybe that's an overreaction. But yeah, I can't bet Shawn Woodson at minus 455.
And the second cheapest fighter on the board, and this could be a huge trickle-down effect depending upon her opponent, assuming she has an opponent. We don't know if she's officially going to get one or not. Unfortunately, that's just what we're dealing with right now. But, 7.1K, Barella all of a sudden becomes the favorite at 7.1K. That would be a massive trickle-down effect when it comes to building lineups, when it comes to ownership. I would imagine it was all of a sudden make ownership expand amongst the pricier fighters because we live in the world of a salary cap, and all of a sudden she would open up the ability to roster a couple of those people. And I guess that's just sort of stay tuned. What else can we say?
Exactly. I mean, we'll probably hear something this evening. That's generally the MO of the UFC. I mean, here's the issue, right? We were already down to 11 fights for this card. If we don't get a replacement for Barella, we go down to 10 fights, which makes it really tricky in terms of ownership. And also eliminates a lot of the EV for cash games. I mean, I probably had my worst cash session of the year with a score of over 600. I'm losing 75% of my cash games when we're only 10 fights on the slate. So I reserve some contests. I may end up, if we only get 10 fights, withdrawing those and just focusing on GPPs and just kind of saving my powder up for the July 11th Fight Island card.
You might just have a lot of pushes, right? Just sort of.
Well, yeah, a lot of pushes and any crazy scores. I mean, to your point, if Barella somehow becomes a favorite, and again, there's no guarantee that she's going to actually be a favorite coming off of 3 losses.
Yeah.
They could put her up. I can't think off the top of my head. Someone who didn't take any damage, who recently fought in that weight class. Maybe a Chukagian steps up. I don't know. I'm just throwing that name out there. Although there would be nothing in it for her. That's probably a bad example because there would be no reason for her to take this fight other than a paycheck. I mean, and there would be downside if she happened to lose. So I don't know. I mean, I can't think of anybody off the top of my head, but we really should hope that we do get a replacement. So at least we have 11 fights going into weigh-ins on Friday.
All right, so main event's always a big conversation, a good place to start when looking at the card. Well, let me ask this before we talk about the main event. Actually, give me your overview. What's your perspective as far as the entire slate as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not loving this slate. There's not a lot of underdogs that I really can make a hard case for. I'd be probably reaching to find some underdogs that I liked. What the UFC is obviously doing here, and I think we mentioned it at the entree. There's a hiatus after this card until July 11th, which would be the inaugural Fight Island card. So what it appears the UFC did is they kind of threw a bunch of fights on this card, some recent signees, and gave a really good main event. I mean, this is a top-notch main event. Dustin Diamond Poirier against Dan Hooker.
Big Saved by the Bell fan.
Yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely. Gotta love Zach. So I actually sat on a plane next to Mario Lopez once. So in any case, let's get back to the fights. Dustin Diamond Poirier against Dan Hooker. Hooker's already talking smack. Poirier is coming off of a loss to Khabib, the GOAT, where Khabib just kind of chain wrestled him to death and ended up finishing him late. Prior to that, he beat Max Holloway. Max stepped up and took a fight he was the featherweight champ. I think he was still a champion at the time, stepped up to 155. And, Dustin was just so much bigger than him and just beat him over 5 rounds. So I'm really looking forward to this fight. I mean, Hooker's good. Hooker fought Paul Felder recently. Very close fight. Could have gone either way. Paul Felder is tough, who's actually improved as he's gotten older. So Hooker's talking smack. He's about a 2-1 underdog here. It's hard for me to look past Poirier, but on a card where there's not a lot of dogs that I like, Poirier certainly has a chance to win. And dare I say it, I hate to say this, in cash games, if we have 11 fights, this is probably not the worst fight to stack. And again, I am not a prolific stacker, but I could definitely see some value in stacking this fight. It's 5 rounds, even though it's going to be predominantly standing. There will be a lot of strikes thrown. Both these guys like to throw. So I could see there being a pretty decent ceiling in terms of stacking.
Yeah, I'm just now stuck in my head. Dustin Diamond, who played Screech, of course, was famous for, amongst other things, celebrity boxing. And I think it didn't go well for him. And that's a comp to some degree. Hopefully this Dustin Diamond fights is better UFC wrestler than Dustin Diamond, the actor, is at celebrity boxing.
By the way, Dean, since we're kind of going all over topics here, celebrity boxing, I will tell you, and there's a sports book called Intertops who was actually taking action on celebrity boxing.
Sure.
Now, I don't know if a lot of people knew this, but celebrity boxing was not live. It was recorded.
Oh.
So I had a friend at Fox and it was leaked out like who the actual winners were. So now again, they limited the amount of action that they took on each fight.
Yeah.
And there was also, if you remember, a Sopranos bet that was like, who was the first person to die on the season of the Sopranos, and it leaked out and they ended up not honoring the wagers. But yeah, they actually honored these wagers. And that was kind of a nice little, like every gambler's dream is knowing the outcome of the event before it actually happens.
The most ridiculous celebrity boxing event of all time was William the Refrigerator Perry versus Manute Bol. I don't know if you had any insight on that one. I know Tanya.
Oh my God, that was like I think the ref actually had to warn the guys to fight if they wanted to get paid.
Oh man, it was it was a disaster. I'm sad to say I'm fairly certain I did watch that. I do recall actually watching that. But,
I watched them both because I had money on it.
Well, why watch when you already know the outcome?
That's true. Just to make sure my friend wasn't, I didn't get bad info,
Back to the slate. It's interesting you mentioned the Poirier versus Hooker, and you say you don't love the slate overall. That this is one of the fights, and we'll talk about some other ones as well too. At least I'm looking at it from a Vegas perspective. Of course, I don't know anything about UFC and MMA. If that's not obvious, if you guys haven't heard that in previous, I'm just sort of like somebody looking at odds and asking questions. But you talk about stacking in cash, and one thing in my brain, and maybe Tim will tell me I'm wrong, that looks kind of alarming that maybe not do that, is it's minus 330 to not go the distance. So it feels like one of these guys has a really low floor. Is that the right way to read that, or am I saying that wrong?
But it's a 5-round fight.
Yeah.
So you get those extra rounds. And if you look at like significant strikes that these guys throw, and they're fairly active, you are going to get a fair number. And look, we can do this on the fly. And that is, again, generally you're right. You want to see grappling points. You want to see maybe someone finishing. However, if you got guys that are prolific strikers, okay. And if you look at, Dustin Poirier, in a 5-round fight against Max Holloway, landed 178 significant strikes.
All right.
One takedown, scored 121 points in that. And so it was predominantly a standing affair. Now we can look real quick at Dan Hooker. Okay. So Dan Hooker in a 5-round fight with Paul Felder landed 122 significant strikes, had one takedown and one advance, and scored 99 points. So you're talking, let's assume there's no takedowns and no advances. If Hooker loses and lands 122 significant strikes, you're talking 61 points from the loser. And if Poirier actually scores up to what he's done, in the past, you're going to get 100-point plus performance from Poirier. So you're talking right off the bat. And again, I will tell you that in Poirier's last 3 wins, okay, let's go last 4 wins. Starting with Pettis, 106, 127, 107, 124. So take the average of those 4. And if he scores the average of those with 60-plus points from Hooker, that's a home run for a cash stack.
Yeah. And so what is, how ambitious do you have to be to fade this fight? Because again, Vegas is telling us one of those guys is going to win within the distance, minus 330. You're telling me they're active fighters as well too. So, you're making 150 lineups. How many did you make with 0 fighters in this fight?
With 11 fights, I will say it'd be highly contrarian to not have the main event. I mean, one, you've got guys who traditionally score well, win or lose in fights. And 2, we only have 11, maybe 10 if we don't get a replacement for Barella. if we don't get a replacement for Barella, I honestly don't know how you can fade the main event. If let's assume we get a replacement for Barella to fight, maybe a handful of lineups just to be highly contrarian. I mean, the problem is I'm not sure where else you're going to really go if you fade this fight, because it does offer value based on how the winner has scored in the past and even how the loser has performed in 5-round fights.
So Maverick was scratched. Maverick's second most expensive fighter on the board. Allen, the most expensive fighter on the board, a minus 305 favorite and minus 220 for that fight to not go the distance. And right below, now the two most expensive will be Perry. Perry's 9K. Perry's minus 315 and minus 350 to not go the distance against Gall. So they're telling us both those fighters are going to win, and both those fighters are going to win early, or at least within the distance.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Platinum Perry is an interesting fighter. I mean, he has left his long-term camp and was allowing his girlfriend, who he calls the goddess, to hold pads for him. He brought in a blue belt and a white belt to help him train. Mickey Gall is a jiu-jitsu fighter predominantly. He's improving in striking, but he really needs to get it to the ground, his opponent. A blue belt and a white belt are not going to cut it against Mickey Gall, and apparently he's not even going to have professional cornermen. He's going to have his girlfriend, the goddess, in the corner with him, is what we hear. I mean, maybe someone will talk some sense into him and he'll have an actual corner person. So there's some really strange narrative around Mike Perry. And, he is a guy that, will take a shot to give a shot. Again, he's a tough fighter. Mickey Gall has a path to victory, and that's essentially getting the fight to the ground. The problem with Mickey Gall is he's a jiu-jitsu fighter that's not a great offensive wrestler. He doesn't have like a power takedown. He relies on guile and trips and, using someone's leverage against them. So he might struggle to get it to the ground. Perry has got decent takedown defense. There is a path to victory for Gall. And again, on a card where there's not a lot of, underdogs that I like, you should probably have some ownership of Gall. Also, we don't know what Perry's cardio is going to look like. I mean, having left camp, training with his girlfriend, holding pads, the goddess, training with a blue belt and a white belt in jiu-jitsu. Who knows what his cardio is going to look like. So if Gall can survive, and Perry starts to get tired, that could play into Gall's hands.
It's interesting that Perry, that's kind of like a wrestling gimmick, almost like he insists on his girlfriend being his corner person, and he's fighting Mickey Gall, who we talked about at pre-show famously. Mickey Gall, at least to me, how I know him, he's most famous for beating CM Punk, the wrestler at UFC. So
feed me CM Punk. Feed me CM Punk is what he said to Dana White. He got his wish, and it was like probably the easiest fight he ever had in his entire career.
I assume Dana White wanted Punk to win, so we probably gave him like the best punching bag possible. So in my brain, I'm thinking Gall's probably not good or probably not a prospect.
No, I mean, he gave him, and I don't know that he necessarily wanted Punk to win. I mean, Mickey Gall, I mean, he was a favorite going into that fight. And CM Punk was really, a wrestler who at, late 30s decided to train, MMA, and he, they had insult to injury. He got paid more than anyone on the two cards that he fought on. I guess because of the draw.
He sold some buys though, I bet. I'm for sure.
He sold, he definitely, or he put some seats in the audience. I mean, he definitely had a fan base, but look, CM Punk wasn't a real fighter. It was a gimmick. It was like the BMF belt that, Jorge Masvidal against Nate Diaz, and The Rock goes in and, gives the belt to the winner of that fight. The belt actually meant nothing. But BMF is, you could probably figure out what that stands for. That was kind of a gimmicky thing that the UFC did that actually put some eyes on their broadcast.
What other fights are kind of jumping out for us? Woodson, who said, is a minus 370 favorite, at least in FanDuel. You have over 400 on DK as of right now, as far as this reporting. Perry is a big favorite. Allen's a big favorite. Miranda Maverick is out, so we don't know what's going to happen with that Barella fight. Stepping back down, let's see. We have Luis Pena's minus 265 versus Karma Worthy, and that's a minus 160 as far as to not go the distance. So that tells me that Pena looks pretty live, but of course Pena's expensive at 8.9K. Amongst these, expensive people, we got Allen, we have Perry, we have Pena. We'll talk about Woodson. Is Pena somebody that might be lost in the shuffle, or do you think ownership's going to be like basically evenly distributed?
I think Pena is going to get some ownership. Violent Bob Ross. Worthy was essentially brought in to lose to a really hyped prospect Smith, Devontae Smith, and he surprised everybody and ended up knocking him out. Before that, he was sort of a journeyman worthy. So this is, look, he's fighting Luis Pena, who is massive for his the weight class. He's really big. He was he was in the season of the tough. He hurt himself. He was promised that he would be brought back by Dana White. Flashy kind of guy. I mean, look, he is not a perfect fighter by any means, and Worthy could certainly win this fight. But Violent Bob Ross, the nickname because he looks like the painter Bob Ross.
Sure.
He's good. He's favored here for a reason. He's likely going to win the fight. I'm actually really interested in the Brendan Allen fight. I mean, he has been in his short career in the UFC, he has been DraftKings gold. 2 fights in the UFC, 110 and 105. Not because he's a striker. He's got a really good ground game. And what's interesting about his opponent is, and I really hate to see this fight because his opponent is a good prospect that's got really good ground games as well. Dow Cross, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, has got a really good ground game too. Allen is probably the more accomplished striker of the two, but I have seen some people with some love for Kyle Daukaus. I like Allen a lot. I think Allen is a vaunted prospect. The guys he beat, he was an underdog to both of them, plus 135. Kevin Holland, who's a hype prospect in his own right, and Tom Breeze, who is a good fighter that just kind of happens to have some anxiety issues. I wish him well, but he was plus 135 going into each one of those fights and performed exceptionally well. I'm curious to see if this fight remains standing, if the ground game cancels each other out, or if Brendan Allen just realizes that his ground game is superior to Kyle's and he does take it down. But I'm kind of interested in Allen here. I know that, Kyle's getting some love and he's the cheapest fighter on the slate, which is why he's getting some love. I'll probably have a few shares of him, but I really like the future of this Brendan Allen kid.
27 years old, making his MMA debut in a quick Google search there.
Yep.
Tell me about, we're talking about Kay Hansen, but she's another one making her debut, but I believe she's only 20.
I love Kay Hansen. I really do. I mean, 20 years old, 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu in Winter Park, California. Interestingly enough, this is not my favorite 20-year-old fighter in the female ranks. She's coming off, she has a nice winning streak in Invicta. I like that she actually took an exhibition boxing match, which means she's working on her hands. She's got a solid ground game. Really like Kay Hansen. Again, in my opinion, watch out. Remember the name Erin Blanchfield, and not only because she's from New Jersey. She is one of Kay Hansen's losses. Kay Hansen has fought both at 115 and 125. Erin Blanchard is a solid 125er. And Kay Hansen, was able to go the decision, lose a majority decision to Erin Blanchard, who's another 20-year-old in Invicta, who I think the UFC should be signing. Now, Kay Hansen is fighting another Invicta signee by the UFC, Jean-Yun Frey. Now, Frey is the atomweight champ in Invicta. And for those of you that don't recognize atomweight, it's because the UFC does not have an atomweight categorization. That's 105, boys and girls. She fought at 105. She's 35 years old, so this is kind of a late signing for her. I think the UFC maybe wants to see what Hansen has. I don't know that I wouldn't go as far as saying they're feeding her a fight to win because, Frey is tough. I mean, she's an atomweight champion. She's skilled in all facets. She's got some good training partners. She is predominantly a decision fighter, as a lot of women, in these weight classes are. I do like Kay Hansen here. However, this line has crept up, to minus 175. And when the fight was announced, I was thinking it might be a pick'em, or I might get some plus money on Hansen, in which case I was ready to pounce. At minus 175 and 8.5K on DraftKings, it makes it a lot harder proposition for me. And there may be a little bit of value in Frey, and I could certainly see some people playing Frey, though I would pick Hansen if I, to pick a winner.
Yeah, minus 175 on a 20-year-old, and like you said, the price of 8.5K doesn't look terribly appealing, especially when I look at the to go the distance, you're talking about how it's probably she's a decision fighter. We're looking at minus 280 to go the distance. So
yeah,
I don't know.
So there's two heavyweight fights, Dean. You've got Maurice Greene, aka the Crochet Boss.
Nice.
He was in Tough House, and I guess as a stress reducer, he would literally crochet. He is training now at Jackson Winks, which is a good camp. He is coming off of, I believe, 3 straight losses, though. This is going to be the easiest spot for him to get a win. Vellante hasn't fought in a while. He's stepping up to heavyweight. He was fighting at light heavyweight. Did not have what I would call a quote unquote distinguished career at light heavyweight. He is stepping up. We'll see what that does for him if he actually has a speed advantage. Maurice Greene is a giant. He's 6'7". He's got a decent ground game, an okay ground game. To actually put up a triangle with his legs. His legs are so long. I do expect this fight will probably stay standing for a while, as long as it lasts. I do think that there's some sneaky value in Greene because, you look at his record and you see that he's coming off of 3 straight losses. However, look at who he's fighting in Vellante. Vellante trains out of New York, which we all know has been hard hit by COVID. I don't know what kind of camp he had. I kind of like Maurice Greene here. And then the other heavyweight fight, which is like a true pick'em. You got Lins against Boser. Lins actually won $1 million in the PFL heavyweight tournament. PFL is the Professional Fightings League. It's a spin-off, not a spin-off, but it's evolved from the World Series of Fighting, which was a solid promotion. Kind of at the same level as, say, Bellator, although some people may argue that. So they have these tournaments every year where you have to win 4 fights and in your weight class. And if you win 4 fights, you win $1 million. So he won $1 million at heavyweight. So he comes into the UFC, and who did they give him in his initial fight? Andre Arlovski, the old warhorse, Andre Arlovski. Arlovski just schooled him. I mean, he was able to, kind of move in and out and not take any damage. And Lynn had some moments in the fight, but it was a clear decision win for Andre Arlovski.
Is that Dana White saying like this UFC is better? you ran through these 4 guys, these 4 cupcakes.
Could very well be. That's not a bad hot take, Dean. So this is interesting. Well, Boser has fought much better competition, I think, in his losses. Now, I hate when you say a guy has fought better competition in his losses. He actually went the distance with Cyril Gagné, who I think is one of the top prospects at heavyweight. He's a French fighter. I honestly think he's better than Rosenstruck, who recently got a title fight against Ngannou. I think Gagné is better than him. And he actually was able to survive 3 rounds. So this is really an interesting fight. I mean, on paper, at least from a perspective of, he's not going up against a guy that's got the same level of experience as Andre Arlovski, but he is going up against a guy that, has fought better, has been in the UFC longer. And this is an even money fight. So I think this is a fight that should be targeted. I do think that this fight will not go the distance. And I have a little bit of love here for Boser. Just because, again, for all those reasons. I mean, the fact that he's got a little bit more UFC experience. He's, he went the distance with Gagné, which impresses me. And, Lins did not look great. He's got some fast hands, which he displayed a bit, and maybe he had octagon jitters. So I would definitely try to have some exposure to this fight in GPP. Unless you have a really strong take, I would stay away from this in cash. But in GPPs, I think this is a fight to target.
Yeah, I mean, it's a true coin toss. They're both minus 112 according to the DK Sportsbook. We scored on my notes like 20 minutes before the show. But you mentioned heavyweights. I saw people on Twitter were not pleased with the heavyweight fight last week. They're just, I guess the dude just kept taking the guy down, but it was just like a bore fest. And is that just as from a viewer perspective? Is that is that a snapshot or is that an outlier? Well, who are the best fights to watch?
Well, I mean, look, I loved it personally because each takedown is 5 DraftKings points.
Yeah.
So I've got Curtis Blades as the world does. So you're thinking 5. So I enjoyed it. Now, if you're a casual or you just want to see a good fight, that's typically not the fight you want to see. And he could not finish Volkov, and he was so gassed. I can't recall seeing a fighter that tired in a win. I mean, he could barely, stand up for the interview. He was so tired, and he cut his lip. He was bleeding a little bit. So I enjoyed it. I mean, he put up a really big number from a DraftKings perspective. And if you did think it was going to go to the decision, that was a pretty sweet payday. Blades by decision. I mean, I think it might've been like 5-1 or something along those lines, blades by decision. So I was okay with it. I mean, generally heavyweight fights, you are going to see finishes because again, it could be a number of things. It could be cardio. It could be the fact that these guys really hit hard and all it takes is one shot, so I honestly like the 145 to 170 fights where there's strikers who are really high velocity, maybe mix in a takedown. Like to me, Gaethje Ferguson was one of the better fights that I've watched. Last week, Emmett Burgos is an instant classic. I mean, Emmett hurts himself and ends up getting an ACL tear and still has enough in the first minute of the fight to actually not only go the distance, but also to knock Burgos down twice in the third round. I mean, what an awesome performance that was. I really enjoyed that. So those are typically the kind of fights that I like to see and watch.
Yeah, you say hurts himself. He tore his ACL.
He tore his ACL. I mean, he tore his ACL. And look, I'm not going to cast aspersions on anybody, but we saw a fighter quit on the stool. And I know I'm going to take a lot of heat for it, but this is the polar opposite of quitting on the stool. No one would have said a word against Josh Emmett knowing that he had a torn ACL if he stopped. But he went in against a guy who is a volume striker, and he not only won the fight, but dropped him twice. So Josh Emmett is one of my new favorite fighters. It's too bad that now he's got this recovery time frame ahead of him, and he is 35. So, not that there's an expiration date on him per se. You generally only see fighters, past 35 in the heavier weight divisions. Generally, that is kind of old for his weight class. But what a great fight that was.
Knowing nothing else, this fight looks kind of interesting to me. Sato versus Rami. I'm not sure of the last name there, but from a DK perspective, Sato is 8.4K, perfectly reasonable price there in the mid-tier. Ramiz is 7.8, Sato minus 150 favorite, but also according to the DK, this is the FanDuel Sportsbook actually, it's minus 210 to not go the distance. And, we need some salary savers, can't just load up on all those people in the 9K area. It feels like this, again, from knowing nothing else, that looks interesting to me. Okay,
so I'm not sure what to do with this fight. Since 2000, in the last 2 years, Bramaj has a total of 55 seconds of fight time. Okay, so he's fought for 55 seconds since 2019, or in the last 2 years, going back to 2018. I don't know what to make of that. I mean, he fights at a decent camp, so he should be getting some good training partners. I mean, I'm not in love with Sato either, but he does have a bit more experience. This guy fights at Fortis, which is a good camp. They've had some issues recently, but it's a solid camp. So having training partners I'm pretty positive that he at least got some good training partners. Sato, on the other hand, Japanese fighter, 15-3 record, fights at a camp out of Japan. I don't know how long he's been in the U.S. I don't know if there's a jet lag issue. He lost his last fight by rear naked choke to Bilal Muhammad. Prior to that, he has wins over Ben Sanders and Matt Vale. Saunders was kind of on his way out of the UFC at the time, so I don't know that you could put a ton of stock in that. Valley was 10-1 at the time, so that was a pretty good win. I just don't know what to do here. I mean, do I assume this guy had a good camp and just overlook the fact that he's only spent 55 seconds in a UFC or in an MMA ring in the last 2 years, as opposed to Sato, who had 2 fights last year at least. I don't know. This is a tough one for me. I think he's going to get some love because, again, people are looking for salary savings. This fight has got a really good inside the distance prop. I would just say have shares of both because at this point, I don't have a really strong opinion either way.
DK puts the nicknames on these guys, on the page. Rami says no nickname, nothing. Unless his nickname is none.
Some of these guys actually do have no nicknames.
Okay.
It's a shame because I love the nicknames. I think that's a big part of the UFC is having a nickname. I mean, there have definitely been some bad nicknames. I don't know if Ramiz has got a nickname. No nickname for Ramiz either.
Oh.
So you're not going to have a nickname for either one of these guys.
Are they just padding out the card here? Is this like a bad fight? They just need to get to 10 or 11 or 12 fights?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the theory is that, everything is kind of geared towards the Fight Island card on July 11th with the 3 title fights and the DraftKings, Millie Maker on that card. And, this is kind of the last card before they all move to, Abu Dhabi. That is the thought here. I mean, we got a really good main event and we got at least I thought we had some interesting prospects. Signed from Invicta. Unfortunately, Miranda Maverick is not fighting. So, as a fight fan, I was looking to some of those fights. But, from a name value perspective, there's not going to be a lot of guys on this card or gals that casuals truly know. I mean, there's not going to be a lot of that. So you're going to really have to do your research and you're going to have to listen to, Morning Grind, and you're going to have to follow Brett Apley and buy his content on RotoGrinders. And listen to all the pods that are out there and see if anybody has a hot take or if anybody is, maybe has some information. And there are some guys that like troll people's, Instagram accounts and social media. I wish I had the time to do that. And
there's value in that, right? I assume there's value in that.
Yeah, there's absolutely value in that. There's one guy, his name is, guy's got the highest energy I've ever seen from a podcaster. His name is Clint. He does this Die Hard MMA podcast. And he does that. That's a part of his game is actually trolling, social media to see if he could pick anything up. And, like, has this guy been training? Was he sick? Anything like that. You just kind of want to look for tidbits because that all goes to narrative. And, I like to listen to these podcasts just to see if I could, pick up something that I don't know. Now, the risk here is that this might talk you off of a situation that you actually like, which is what happened to me last week. I had love for Torres. I had love for Hubbard. I really didn't play either of them. I did not play a lot of Van Buren, thankfully. But like sometimes if you stare at something long enough, you find something wrong with it when you should have kind of just gone with, your initial inclination. So I caution you when you do listen to a lot of different podcasts.
Yeah, last week did not go well for your boy. I fell into all those terrible big favorites, and I did chase the late slate because I wasn't aware it was a thing until somebody on Twitter told me.
And the late slate is different too, Dean, because you've got that captain slot, which is like how FanDuel operates. So, I haven't really put a lot of time and effort into thinking about it, but there are some ways to potentially hedge exposure that you have to the main slate. Using the captain slot and using the late slate. There's likely some ways. I just haven't really thought it through yet. I do play both slates. Unfortunately, my focus is always on building for the main slate, so I don't devote as much time as I probably should in setting lineups, for the late slate. But there's certainly value to be held there.
It feels like it's a good slate to potentially embrace variance because it seems like ownership's going to be squeezed, and a lot of it's probably dependent upon what happens with Maverick's opponent, Barella, and who she ends up fighting if she does end up fighting somebody.
Yeah, let's really hope we don't have 10 fights. I mean, I may end up having to withdraw some of my cash entries because I did so poorly, last time out. And I mean, I was really helpful. I was really happy that, the bets I gave out were successful. Obviously, Josh Emmett, and I'm fully transparent. I mean, I post my bets up on Twitter. I don't track because I'm not a tout, I'm not looking to sell anything. But I did put that parlay up plus 188. Curtis Blades and Emmett. That was a nice play for me, and it really kind of saved me from some of my losses on the DFS side. I was really struggling to find bets, and I was hoping to get Kay Hansen at plus money, but that didn't happen.
You got something this week that's jumping out to you? I know it's Wednesday, it's early, you reserve to change your mind and all that, but yes, what are we looking at here?
Yeah, okay, so let's go to the book here.
We can find you on Twitter if you change your mind. I'm sure you tweet stuff out that anything to discover.
Yeah, I was going to actually play Miranda Maverick in a parlay with Kay Hansen, but that didn't work out. again, it's kind of a high risk, high reward type of situation. But if you want to take a stab at Mickey Gall, I really don't see Mickey Gall winning by decision. I would expect that if Mickey Gall wins, he wins by sub. Now, I don't see that prop yet. I don't know if you have that, Dean. Mickey Gall by submission. I see that as his path to victory.
I got Mickey Gall. Yeah, so by KO or TKO, he's plus 2,000. By points, plus 800. By submission, as you asked for, he's plus 500 according to the FanDuel Sportsbook.
Yeah, and again, I honestly can't see another path to victory for Mickey Gall. I mean, he's a jiu-jitsu fighter. If you get a tired Mike Perry and Mickey Gall can use his jiu-jitsu to get him to the ground, I could certainly see him winning by sub. And you're getting plus 500 on that. Take a little stab at plus 500. Some other bets that I was looking at. I mean, parlaying, Dustin Poirier with Brendan Allen and the Crochet Boss. And I think that is going to give you, that was definitely plus money. So Brendan Allen, Poirier, and let's look at the Crochet Boss.
Brendan Allen, all in. That's his nickname.
All in Brendan Allen and the Crochet Boss. Okay, so that will give you plus 178. So if you were to parlay all in Brendan Allen, Diamond Dustin Poirier, and the Crochet Boss, Maurice Greene, do a 3-fighter parlay, that's going to give you plus 178. So again, it's not very sexy. These are all fairly big favorites. I am going to take a stab at Gall by submission because I do think that that's his path to victory. And I'll take the additional, 3-1 odds over what I would get betting him straight. Cause I honestly don't see him winning a decision and I don't see him winning by knockout. I think he's going to get beat up pretty badly if it goes to distance. And Mike Perry's got that one-punch knockout power. So, inversely, I'm not sure what Perry by knockout is. I'm sure it's not very attractive. But I would also look at Perry by knockout to maybe get that minus 305 down if you want to go the other way.
Let's see. I can
throw a
pull that
little
up
bit
on
each. Perry by knockout and Gall by submission and see if there's an ARB there.
Perry by KO or TKO is minus 140.
Okay, that's not horrible considering he's almost 3-1, to win regardless.
Minus 315 just to win the fight.
Yeah, so I mean, you could certainly hedge that Gall play by betting Perry at minus 140, or inversely, you could bet Perry to win by KO minus 140 and hedge that. That's probably a better hedge. Hedge that with Gall at sub because you're getting 5-1 on Gall by sub. So if you like Perry, which a lot of people do, you bet him to win by knockout, which I think is his path to victory at minus 140, and then you got a 5-1 hedge on Mickey Gall. Now, obviously, if the fight goes to decision, you're going to lose both bets. But I really do think that the path to victory for Gall is submission, and the path to victory for Perry is knockout.
Jump back to DK. Let's throw the main event out. What other fight you feel you're really stressing on getting one of the two fighters in most of your lineups? Okay,
so I really think you need exposure to the heavyweight fight. That's essentially a coin toss.
That's Lins versus Bosser.
Yeah, that's Lins versus Bosser. I do like that fight. Brendan Allen. I think you need exposure. I like Brendan Allen a lot, but because Doc House has some wrestling and is on kind of a roll, even though I think Allen is the more accomplished striker, which isn't saying much because he's not a great striker. I wouldn't mind having a few shares of Doc House, but looking at Brendan Allen, I mean, you are likely going to get, 10, 11, 12x, if he wins, unless, and here's the big caveat, unless their wrestling cancels out and it's a real sloppy, decision striking fight and he ekes out a decision. So if you really think that's the way it's going to go, that each one of these, that their wrestling cancels out, neither one of these guys is going to score well in a decision simply because they're not high volume strikers and they're not overly proficient strikers, right? Violent Bob Ross is probably not a bad play. Woodson, he's a decision fighter typically, but he's a huge favorite. He's going to get ownership. I would not mind taking a flyer with the Rosa. He's not horrible. I mean, he had 3 losses, was given his pink slip from the UFC, had a fight in a minor league promotion. Now he's back in the UFC. I really do like, though, the crochet boss here. I've never been high on Vellante as a 205er, and now he's moving up to heavyweight, fighting a guy that's huge, training at a good camp in Jackson Wayne, coming off of 3 losses. Greene knows he's going to have to do well in this fight. I can't imagine they're going to keep him around with 4 Ls. So I really do see upside here for Greene at 8.6K. I think he's fairly safe as far as safe goes on this slate, at 8.6. And then, I'm curious from a fan's perspective to see how Kay Hansen does. Again, I really like her game. She's only 20 years old. She is fighting the Invicta champ. Price is a little too high for me. I was hoping that this would be closer to a pick and maybe like an 82, 8,000 type of fight on DraftKings. At 8,500, I just don't know. I'll probably have a few shares of her. And then, you've got the native psycho. We haven't talked about this fight, Jordan Griffin versus Zalal. Zalal is getting some love here. Zalal is a Moroccan fighter who I believe trains at Factory X. He looks pretty good on paper, comes from a good camp. Griffin has got far more experience, also trains at a good camp, I believe, Rufus Sport. He tends to give a lot of rounds away, Griffin, and then kind of makes a comeback. So this could be an interesting, sneaky fight to target. I don't, again, on an 11 or a 12 fight card, I don't think this fight would typically get a lot of ownership. But, on an 11, maybe 10 fight card, you're going to have ownership, especially if you're max entering. So I would kind of look to play a little bit of each side of this fight because I think there's sneaky upside.
Yeah, Vegas is telling us to place a coin toss. Griffin minus 106, Zalal minus 114, minus 144 to go the distance as far as that prop. You mentioned Rosa does not have a price just yet on DK. I imagine his name will be plugged into the player pool soon enough.
Yep.
And if I can gauge these well, probably around 7K, 7.1, 7.2. Is that your guess somewhere in that area?
Let's see. Okay, so we've got Woodson at what, 8.8? I'm thinking probably 7.4 was my guess. Close
All
enough,
right.
though. I'm thinking around 7.4.
Yeah, and amongst that group, I know you talked about Gall potentially winning. Were these in a fight that at least is expected to end early? Do you think Arosa is better than those options? Just kind of like grab shares of each, or is there any sort of take right now?
I think Arosa might be less likely to be finished for whatever that's worth.
Yeah.
Which generally means like he's got a higher floor. But look, I think Worthy certainly has a shot to win. Again, Gall has a path to victory, although I think he might be better to bet. Versus DraftKings. Although I think he is going to get some love. I've already heard some people who have some love for Gall. I do think that he's going to have to be really careful to avoid the platinum Mike Perry, round 1 bum rush. And if he could get through that, if he could get Perry tired and sap his cardio, and if his corner person, the goddess, is not giving him good advice, then, who knows? I mean, Gall is going to have a professional corner. He presumably had a real camp for this, did not have his goddess holding pads for him, and trained with people other than a blue belt and a white belt. So the narrative I like on Mickey Gall, which is why I'm going to play some of them on DK, but also I'm going to probably take a bit of that, plus 500 by submission.
Anything else you want to reiterate? Anything else you want to bring home? Feel free to do so. Of course, tell the people where they can find you on Twitter, any sort of podcast you have else that's going on out there. I know you work with Brett sometime as well, too. You kind of referenced them earlier. Let the people know where, of course, there will be updates. This is Wednesday. News will be changing. And where you're going to give us the news. Yeah,
keep your eye on the weigh-ins. Again, you don't go all in on this on this slate just because there's a hiatus. There are going to be some highly attractive contests on the, inaugural Fight Island card, 3 title fights, a Millie Maker. Save some of your powder for that. I'm finding it really difficult to create a cash lineup here. I see this as more of a GPP card. Things may change depending on whether Barella gets an opponent or not. You can find me at SunTszu. Brett and I do some stuff. We have this MMA Fan Radio thing going on. You can find that on Twitter under MMA Fan Radio. If you're really into MMA, we do a lot of fun stuff. We have occasionally we do like MMA Jeopardy. We do like Loudon Thinks, which, we stole or borrowed. We also do, look backs and previews. It's really fun. And again, we're not like getting rich off of it. It's more of a, let's drive MMA, let's drive betting, let's drive DFS. So I do that. And again, I'm just happy to be on with you, Dean. The professionalism of RotoGrinders is top notch. It's gotten me back into grinding my own coffee again. So I'm really happy about that. And I'm going to definitely, test out my Mocha Master with my Jamaican Blue Mountain when I listen to myself back.
Happy to have you on. Much appreciated. Thank you for the kind words as well. That was Art of War, SunTszu, Joe. I was Dean. Good luck this week when you're playing UFC, MMA. Good times with that. This was the Morning Grind. We're out of here.
Peace. Holler.